The blue planet turned beneath him like a living eye. Clouds veined across its surface. Oceans shimmered with sunlight that looked too bright for comfort. To Field Observer Talvek of the Selenari Expeditionary Corps, Earth was both beautiful and deeply wrong. Atmospheric density, 1.2 standard, he whispered, adjusting his suit's internal filters. Oxygen content excessive. Gravity hostile. The readouts glowed a dull amber across his visor, warning him of a dozen environmental violations. Any civilized species would call this place uninhabitable. But the report said life here thrived. Feral, resilient, violent. He should have refused the assignment. Yet curiosity was the rarest currency among his kind, and Talvek had always been rich in it. He was the youngest xenobiologist in his cohort to qualify for field duty. Studying apex lifeforms from the safety of orbit was safe, sterile, predictable, but to stand where they walked, to feel their world, that was something only a fool or a pioneer attempted. And Talvek was a little of both. His drop pod entered the atmosphere with a long shriek, plasma licking its hull like orange fire. Through the vibration and static, he felt the air claw at the craft. This world resisted entry, as if it resented visitors. When the impact came, it drove him into his harness with bone-grinding force. Dust and wind howled outside, thick as storm surf. He ran diagnostics with trembling fingers. Hull integrity, stable. Airlock pressure, nominal outside temperature. Mild 291 Kelvin. Radiation. Tolerable. Planetfall achieved, he said softly, and his voice seemed too small for the vast silence pressing in. He opened the hatch. The first breath of Earth hit him like a blow, air so dense with oxygen it almost burned. The scent, salt, soil, and something sweet he couldn't name. 1,000 unseen life forms whispered at the edge of his hearing. Insects, birds, mammals. The entire biosphere moved. Talvek stepped onto the soil of a Deathworld. The landing zone was a clearing surrounded by colossal trees, ancient organisms rising 100 meters tall, their roots tearing through rock. He scanned one and blinked in disbelief. Cellular complexity beyond baseline, he muttered. These things, they should not stand in gravity like this. He adjusted his wrist cam, recording. Each plant, each rustle of wind, each bird call went into the databanks. He would be the first Selenari to document the world that had given rise to humans, a species so feared across the galaxy that the Senate still classified them as Tier Red. Non-contact, the directive was clear. Observe only. No interference. Talvek glanced at the silver badge pinned to his chest plate. Observation only. He wondered if curiosity counted as interference. By the third rotation, the landscape had begun to feel inhabited. Not just by beasts, but by memory. Ruins littered the forest edge, shapes half swallowed by moss and time. Rectangular stones, rusted metal frames, human architecture. His sensors tagged radiation isotopes consistent with war-era remnants. He crouched beside a fragment of twisted alloy, brushing away vines. The material had once been engineered with molecular precision, stronger than anything his species had built at the same stage of development. And yet they'd discarded it, moved on. What manner of creatures fights wars in their own sky and still survives their own extinction cycles? He murmured into his recorder. The forest didn't answer, but a breeze moved through the leaves like a sigh. Late on the fourth rotation, a ping echoed through his comms, short, rhythmic, deliberate, not natural. Not random, he froze. Control. This is Talvek. I'm detecting an unknown signal source at Grid 3 Delta. Requesting protocol verification. No reply, only the faint whisper of static. He replayed the ping, 3 short tones, a pause, then 2 longer. Almost melodic. The pattern seemed familiar. He cross-referenced linguistic archives. Within seconds, his AI assistant matched the rhythm to a human distress signal, SOS. He stared at the translation, pulse rising. Impossible. There shouldn't be any humans left in this sector. And then faintly across the clearing came a sound he didn't want to believe in. Footsteps. He spun, scanning thermal and motion spectrums, nothing. The forest was alive. Yes, but only with ambient fauna. Still, the feeling of being watched refused to fade. It was like standing beneath deep water, knowing something unseen drifted just out of reach. He forced himself to continue the survey. He cataloged soil density. Water samples, fauna tracks, some disturbingly large. One set of prints looked bipedal, humanoid. He crouched beside them and activated a depth scan. The impressions were recent. Local primate species, he theorized aloud. Maybe a residual mutation line from the native sentience? His AI chirped. Footprint match 99.7% human. Talvek froze as the sun sank, faster than he expected, too red. Too close. Long shadows filled the forest. He set up his camp module and raised a low-energy shield perimeter. The instruments hummed, soft and steady, but the night beyond pulsed with alien life. Eyes gleamed between the trees. Predators, curious or hungry. Sometimes both. He recorded audio logs by dim blue light, his voice growing slower, quieter with each entry. Log entry 004. Planetary conditions stable. Faunal presence significant. Possible surviving descendants of Homo sapiens detected. Signal received, origin unclear if any are left. They've adapted beyond anything we predicted. He paused, listening to the wind. In the static, he thought he heard something whisper his name, but that was impossible. He hadn't transmitted it. Sleep came fitfully. Near dawn, he woke to silence. A silence so absolute it seemed to erase thought itself. Even the insects had stopped. He stepped outside. Above, the stars burned bright through the thinning mist. A breathtaking canopy of light stretched from horizon to horizon. He stood there a long while, visor off, just breathing the air. There's no logic to this, he said softly. No symmetry. And yet it all works. Every law balanced, every orbit precise. How? He looked at the stars and felt, for the first time in his life, something that wasn't data, not awe, not fear, something deeper. This can't just be an accident, he murmured. Then, as if in answer, a whisper came from the tree line. No accident. He spun, heart pounding, weapon drawn, but the forest stood empty. The translator didn't register the word, but his heart did. Field observer Talvek reporting, confirmed evidence of humanoid survivors, possibly remnant humans. Though adaptive physiology far exceeds projections, planet exhibits phenomena inconsistent with current models of evolution and entropy balance. Hypothesis forming, either this world refuses death, or something greater refuses to let it die. He shut down the recorder. For a long time he stared at the forest where the voice had come from. He felt eyes on him again, not hostile but aware. The kind of gaze that measured not your strength but your soul, he whispered almost involuntarily. If anyone's listening, I mean no harm. A gust of wind answered, carrying with it a faint human scent. Smoke, salt, sweat. And for the first time since he'd landed, Talvek wasn't sure which of them was the observer, and which was being studied. The forest had changed. At first glance, it looked the same. Dense canopies, towering trunks, air alive with unseen wings. But to field observer Talvek, every sound now had intent. Every shadow watched. The data feed from orbit had gone dark hours ago. No satellite return. No command pings. No telemetry from his colleagues. He should have received updates from the other two scouts, Dr. Sental and Navigator Irix, who had landed on different continents. Both were experienced, disciplined. Both had gone silent within 24 hours of touchdown. Solar interference, the AI suggested. But the static wasn't solar. It pulsed, rhythmic, deliberate, like a heartbeat. Talvek tried to establish visual contact using his orbital drone network. He launched 3 survey drones, each the size of a human hand, and sent them skyward through the mist for 6 minutes. Their telemetry was flawless. On the 7th, one by one they blinked out, no explosion, no power drain, no interference field, just gone. He replayed the footage frame by frame. The last image before blackout showed a faint shape at the edge of the lens. Humanoid outline, heat signature unstable, as though cloaked by refractive layers of atmosphere. He enhanced it. The shape was kneeling beside the drone and, looking straight into the lens, the eyes glowed faintly gold before the feed. Ended. Talvek's instincts screamed for orbit extraction. But protocol bound him. Do not abandon your post without verification of hostile intent. The Selenari valued composure, logic, restraint, but he was no longer sure logic applied here. He rechecked his proximity sensors, a 360-degree field. Passive scan. The readings flickered. At least 4 warm-blooded entities were within 50 meters of his camp perimeter. He turned slowly. The forest moved with him. Morning came in amber light. The mist turned gold between trees, and something about the stillness gnawed at him. He found footprints again, deeper this time, closer, human. He followed the trail until it ended abruptly at a riverbank. There, embedded in the mud, was something metallic. He knelt. It was a dog tag. Human script etched across its face. Corroded but legible. His translator parsed the letters. Corporal David Reyes, United States Marine Corps. Talvek frowned. His knowledge of human history was patchy, but he recognized United States in a vanished polity, centuries old, which meant the owner of this artifact had been dead for at least 400 planetary cycles. Yet the prints were fresh. He turned the tag over, scratched into the back by hand, almost desperate. Still here, still human. He stared at the words until the river's reflection rippled and blurred his visor. Still human, he whispered. Even after extinction. A chill ran through him that had nothing to do with the air. That night the transmission came through, crackled, broken. A voice, human, male, low. Talvek. Do you copy? His blood froze. The voice used his name. He checked the comm logs. The signal source was planetary, less than 2 kilometers northeast. He swallowed hard. Identify yourself. You shouldn't have come here, the voice replied. This is their world. Static engulfed the rest. Whose world? Talvek shouted. Identify yourself. Nothing. Only the wind answering through the trees. Sleep was no longer possible. The sounds of life had changed. Less chaotic, more synchronized. As if the ecosystem itself had begun listening. He found himself speaking softly to the darkness as though it could hear him. Is this what the humans called faith? Talking into silence, hoping something hears? His AI chimed uncertainly. Define faith. Talvek smiled weakly. The belief that you're not alone, even when you are. He looked up at the stars again. Clouds parted for a moment, revealing a sky ablaze with galaxies. A perfect geometry, balanced and endless. Who designed this symmetry? He murmured. It cannot be random. Something rustled behind him, and for a fraction of a second, he thought he heard a whisper in a human voice. You're right. He turned sharply. Nothing. Only the trees swaying as if stirred by laughter. On the 5th day, Talvek discovered the remains of a campsite. Not alien. Human. Rusting equipment. Torn fabric. Tools made of alloys now obsolete even to Selenari standards. The camp looked abandoned for decades, yet the ashes in the fire pit were warm. He examined a small notebook found beside the pit. The paper had nearly rotted, but one line survived. If they come for us, remember, I pray before you run. Pray. He'd heard the word before in historical archives. A ritual of communication directed not to others but to something beyond. He sat in silence for a long while, the word echoing through his mind like a frequency he'd almost forgotten how to hear. That night, he attempted one last uplink to the orbiting command vessel. Control, this is Field Observer Talvek. Attempting emergency sync. I've encountered phenomena beyond classification. There are... A burst of static cut him off, then a human voice. Female, calm. Measured. Observer Talvek. Please confirm your coordinates. He exhaled with relief. Finally, Control, yes, transmitting coordinates now. Negative, the voice interrupted. We already have them. He froze. Repeat? We're here. The line went dead. By dawn. Talvek understood something essential. He was no longer the one studying. Someone was studying him. He reviewed his environmental recordings for the last 24 hours. Every minute showed faint anomalies. Shapes in the mist, reflections in his visor. Patterns in the wind. At least 7 instances of shadows matching his movements a half-second after he made them, as though reality itself were imitating him. He sat in the middle of his clearing and spoke aloud. Who are you? The forest breathed, and then, faintly, gently, came a human voice close enough to feel its warmth. The question isn't who we are. It's what you've forgotten. He turned, weapon raised. No one there. But in the soil beside him, words had been traced by a human hand. We remember our maker. This Is Talvek of the Selenari Corps observation. Proceeding under compromised parameters. Contact. With unidentified humanoid entities confirmed. Their behavior suggests intelligence, coordination, and reverence. I don't understand it. But they act not as predators, nor primitives, more like guardians. He stopped recording, his hand trembling slightly. A shadow passed overhead, not a cloud, not a bird. Something vast and mechanical. A human design, impossibly ancient, impossibly still functional. Its hull bore faded letters, barely readable through corrosion and moss. UNS Daedalus. He whispered the translation. United Nations ship, Daedalus, one of humanity's first starcraft. Lost centuries ago. The ship moved silently through the mist, not flying but floating, defying gravity with grace no Selenari craft had achieved. And beneath its shadow, the air itself seemed to hum, not with engines but with something deeper. Something alive. Talvek fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the quiet majesty of it. He felt suddenly small, and for the first time, humbled. They were never gone, he whispered. They learned to survive the impossible, by believing in something greater than fear. His last thought before sleep claimed him was not of data nor duty, but a simple human question. What if belief
is the real technology?
The forest was different now. It wasn't the trees or the air or the light, it was the silence. A silence that had shape, that listened back. Field observer Talvek moved through the undergrowth with slow, careful steps. His armor muted the sound of movement, but he could feel vibrations in the ground with every footfall, as though the planet itself was aware of him. Somewhere behind him, something walked in perfect rhythm with his pace. He stopped. So did it. He took 3 more steps. Quick, uneven. The echo followed, a half-second delayed. AI, he whispered. Confirm secondary motion vector. The onboard assistant responded calmly. Affirmative. Humanoid mass detected. Range 18 meters. Tracking. The voice cut out. The mist rolled low between the trees, soft and heavy, carrying the smell of rain and iron. Through it, shapes moved, vague outlines of muscle and bone. Flashes of movement, too, coordinated for animals. He lifted his weapon and set the visor to full-spectrum scan. Infrared. Nothing. Ultraviolet. Nothing. Electromagnetic. Static. It was as though the forest swallowed energy itself. Vec turned off the visor and relied on his eyes. That was when he saw it, a figure standing in the fog ahead, perfectly still, bipedal, barefoot, wrapped in some kind of dark fabric that blended with the forest. Skin pale against the gloom, it stood like a soldier at ease, arms loose, head tilted slightly, gaze unreadable. He froze. The training of 1,000 simulations screamed at him to retreat. Yet he couldn't. Something about the presence poised. Patient held him in place. Then the figure spoke. Don't run. The voice was human, male, calm, steady, carrying the weight of command. Talvek's first instinct was denial. Translator error, phonetic coincidence, but the words repeated clearer this time. Don't run, Talvek. It knew his name. He tried to speak, but his mouth was dry. Identify yourself, he managed. How do you know me? The figure didn't move closer, yet its voice came as though standing beside him. We've been listening, since you fell from the sky. His pulse spiked. Then you are human. Actual human survivors? A soft sound, almost laughter. Survivors? You still think extinction means the end. The figure lifted its hand, pointing toward the horizon. The mist parted just enough for Talvek to glimpse faint, flickering lights between the trees. Structures geometric, alive with slow pulses of blue and white. Cities. Hidden cities. His breath caught. Impossible. Our scans found no infrastructure, no settlements. Because you were looking for machines, the voice interrupted. We learned to live without them. Talvek's mind reeled. A civilization, technologically dormant, biologically adapted, undetectable by normal sensors. That defied every known model. How many of you are there? He asked softly. The figure smiled faintly.
Enough to remember. The figure turned slightly, gaze shifting to the tree line.
They're testing you now, he said. Who? The ones who still doubt your kind. They remember what came before, the burning skies, the wars. You're not the first to come here. The others didn't listen. Talvek's grip tightened on his rifle. Others, you mean my colleagues? Maybe not anymore. From the shadows, the sound of movement. Soft, precise, disciplined. Shapes flickered in and out of view, dozens of them circling silently. The forest itself seemed to exhale. They weren't animals. They were men and women, faces painted in ash and soil, eyes bright as predators. Talvek aimed his weapon, but the lead figure raised a hand. Don't. They won't attack if you don't. He hesitated, lowered the barrel. The others melted back into the fog, leaving only the first figure behind. They call themselves Watchers, he said. Guardians of what's left. Talvek studied him carefully. Guardians of what? Of who we were. Of who we still are. The tone carried pride, but also sorrow. We've seen civilizations fall. Ours. Yours. The stars don't care who claims them. Talvek, but he does. That last word stopped him cold. He? The figure nodded toward the heavens. The one who made this all possible. Talvek felt a strange tremor inside. He'd studied hundreds of cultures, thousands of belief systems, yet this simple conviction cut through every defense. He whispered, "You still believe?" The human smiled faintly. We never stopped. Lightning cracked across the distant sky, illuminating the forest in white fire. In that flash, Talvek saw the truth. The humans weren't just surviving. They had changed. Their eyes reflected light differently. Their skin bore bioluminescent veins, subtle and elegant, as if nature itself had partnered with their will. Evolution by design or by faith, he raised his scanner. You've integrated at a molecular level with your environment. Symbiotic nanobiology, or something beyond it. The man tilted his head. Why do you always need names for miracles? Talvek lowered the device slowly. Because naming things is how we understand them. Maybe some things aren't meant to be understood, the man replied softly. Only respected. The word struck him harder than any weapon. He realized suddenly that humanity had transcended the cycle of extinction not through domination or retreat, but through balance. They had learned to live with their Deathworld, not against it, and now they watched from the mist, testing whether the newcomers were capable of the same humility. The man, if he was truly a man, stepped closer, until Talvek could see the scars across his skin. Old wounds healed long ago. A story written in pain. You came to study us, he said. Now you'll learn what that means. Talvek tried to step back, but the world spun. His suit sensors screamed error warnings. Neural interference, massive and localized. He dropped to one knee. Your technology won't help you here, the human said gently. This world rejects arrogance. It remembers every trespass. Darkness crept at the edges of Talvek's vision. But within that darkness he saw things. Visions, fragments, memories not his own. Humans walking through fire. Children rebuilding cities from ash. Soldiers praying before battle, not for victory, but for forgiveness. He saw oceans healing, forests returning, humanity rising not through conquest, but through surrender to something greater. And through it all, a single phrase whispered in his mind. We are still human. He gasped, tearing off his helmet. Air rushed in, too thick, too alive, and he coughed violently. But through the haze he could feel the truth. The planet itself was alive because of them. The humans weren't surviving Earth. Earth was surviving through them. He awoke hours later beneath the canopy. His suit was offline, drained. The human was gone. But in his palm lay a small object. A carved stone symbol. Simple, circular, with an engraved line of old Earth language. He translated it slowly. Faith is the science of the unseen. His throat tightened. He stood shakily and looked to the east. Dawn was rising, burning gold through the mist, turning every leaf to fire. Somewhere, a child's laughter echoed through the trees. Real, human. Talvek fell to his knees again, not from fear or exhaustion, but from understanding. Control, he whispered into his dead calm. If anyone's listening, we were wrong about them. They don't need saving. They were never lost. He looked toward the sunlight breaking through the canopy, a trembling smile crossing his face. Maybe they're what happens when creation remembers its creator. Dawn rose like a slow exhale. Mist bled from the trees and the light turned everything gold, ancient, sacred. For a moment, Talvek forgot what fear was. He'd seen many worlds, some more beautiful, some more advanced, but none that felt alive like this. Earth breathed. Each gust of wind seemed to carry intention. He took a step, and the ground beneath him answered with the faintest vibration. Not seismic, not mechanical. Rhythmic. Like a pulse. He wasn't alone. He'd lost contact with Dr. Sental and Navigator. IRIX 8 planetary rotations ago. Their beacons had fallen silent at opposite ends of the globe, cut off mid-transmission. Now, with his systems failing, he had one last trace in a weak, dying signal originating 80 kilometers north. IRIX's code. Talvek calibrated his last functional drone and set it to scout ahead, following the river northward. Then he began to walk. The air was thick, humid, charged. Every few meters his visor flickered as though the planet resented being measured. He passed through ruins, human cities reclaimed by nature. Skeletons of skyscrapers draped in ivy, glassless towers split by trees. But there were lights inside some of them. Faint. Moving. He zoomed in. Shadows walked the halls of the ruins carrying fire, human silhouettes. Still alive, he felt his pulse quicken. IRIX, he whispered. You found them, didn't you? The wind seemed to answer. By midday he reached the river. Its waters were impossibly clear, reflective like mercury in sunlight. He knelt, running a sensor probe through the current. The readings were inconsistent. High mineral content, microscopic bioluminescent cells, and something else, a pattern. A repeating frequency embedded within the molecular vibration of the water itself. He amplified it. The sound that emerged was a faint hum, melodic, harmonic, almost chorale. It wasn't just flowing water, it was singing. Talvek removed his gloves and touched the surface. The moment his fingers met the current, a flood of images rushed through him. Flashes of memory, places he'd never seen, faces he didn't know. A child laughing beside a campfire, a soldier holding a friend's hand beneath burning skies, a scientist kneeling among ruins, whispering a prayer. He jerked back, gasping. The water rippled, and for an instant, a face formed in it. IRIX, Talvek, the image whispered, distorted and faint. You shouldn't have stayed. Then it was gone. He followed the signal deeper into the valley. The forest grew darker, quieter, the kind of silence that remembered death. Eventually, he found what he was looking for, a camp. Or what was left of one. Tents shredded by claws or storms, datapads melted into soil, a few bones scattered in the dust. He knelt beside a tattered Selenari flag half buried in mud. There was something ritualistic about the way the camp had decayed. Nothing random. Every item placed with intent, as if laid to rest. He found IRIX's ID chip embedded in a piece of armor, and beside it, carved into the metal with something sharp, a single human word, home. Talvek stared at it for a long time. His colleague had died here, yet somehow that word didn't feel like despair. It felt like peace. He walked farther into the ruins of the camp and froze. Something shimmered faintly in the shadows, blue light pulsing in slow, steady rhythm. Pods. 6 of them, grown into the soil, half organic, half metallic, like cocoons. Inside each one lay a Selenari. Still, peaceful, eyes closed. The pod light synced to a single pulse. Not mechanical, but biological. Talvek placed a hand against one pod. The moment he did, a faint electrical current surged through his suit. A projection flickered across his visor, a recording. IRIX's face appeared, worn but calm. If you're seeing this, Talvek, it means you followed. I told you not to, Static. Then his voice again. We thought we were studying evolution. Turns out evolution studied us. They found us, Tal, the humans. They didn't kill us. They showed us something. Something about this world, about all worlds. There's a pattern, a presence. We thought faith was superstition, but it's structure, energy. Memory that shapes reality itself. He leaned closer in the recording, eyes luminous with awe. We saw him, Tal, not a god of myth, the one behind the equations. The symmetry we could never explain. The image flickered out. The sound of footsteps broke the stillness. Talvek turned and saw her. A human woman stepped from the tree line, wearing simple woven garments, eyes like stormlight. She carried no weapon. "Don't be afraid," she said softly. He raised his rifle anyway. "Identify yourself." She tilted her head, almost smiling. "You've already met one of us. The one who spoke to you by the river." "The soldier," he whispered. She nodded. "We're what's left of those who refused to leave. We stayed when the stars called others away. We listened when the world spoke back." Talvek's throat tightened. "My team, what did you do to them?" "They saw the truth," she said simply. "Some chose to join it, some couldn't." Her tone wasn't cruel, but only sad. "They're not dead, Talvek. They're changed." He gestured toward the pods. "Those are them, aren't they?" "Yes, we offered them peace. This world doesn't kill, it transforms." Her eyes softened. "Do you understand yet?" He shook his head slowly. "You're saying the planet itself is alive?" Her smile deepened. "Alive because something wanted it that way." She stepped closer, touching a tree beside her. The bark shimmered faintly beneath her hand. "We call it the breath. It's what holds everything together. Some call it physics. Others call it grace." Talvek's pulse raced. "You've turned faith into a living system." "No," she corrected gently. "Faith was always the system. We just stopped ignoring it." She reached into a pouch and drew out a small object, a silver pendant, smooth and circular, etched with geometric lines that matched ancient human constellations. She held it out to him. "When you return to your people," she said, "tell them we are not extinct. Tell them we found what they were too afraid to see." He stared at the pendant. "And if they don't believe me?" Her gaze lifted toward the heavens where the clouds broke to reveal 1,000 stars burning bright. "Then tell them to look up. The proof was always there." She placed the pendant in his hand. Warm, pulsing faintly as if alive. Talvek returned to the pods one last time. He watched the slow rhythm of their light, heard the faint hum echo through the valley. A heartbeat that wasn't just theirs, but the planet's. He spoke softly, unsure if he was praying or recording. "This is Talvek. I found them. The lost ones, they're part of something greater now. They didn't die, and they became part of the harmony that binds this world. Humans call it faith, I call it coherence." He paused. Maybe they were never Deathworlders. Maybe they were the first to understand how to live with death. He looked up at the sky, and endless, burning, perfect, and for the first time, he whispered words he didn't fully understand, in a language that wasn't his own. "Thank you." The mist stirred, almost like a breath in response. Night came quietly to the valley. The stars above Earth were impossibly close, brilliant, heavy, alive. Talvek stood among the ruins of his team's camp, the pendant the human woman had given him still glowing faintly in his hand. It wasn't metal. Not entirely. Its geometry shifted under his touch, fluid yet solid, like matter unsure whether to obey physical law. He turned it over, scanning it with what little energy remained in his suit. The readings were inconclusive. No isotope decay, no measurable power source, only rhythm. A precise oscillation matching the heartbeat frequency of the planet's electromagnetic field. Pattern match. 99.7% similarity to biological resonance. He frowned. "It's alive." He replayed Irix's final message, analyzing every frame. In the background of the transmission, just before the distortion took over, there was a faint pulse of light reflected on the soil. It flickered in ordered intervals. Not random. Structured a code. He amplified it, slowed it, and overlaid it with the oscillation from the pendant. The two patterns aligned perfectly, forming a harmonic wave. And then, as his visor processed it, symbols began to emerge, glowing threads of light suspended in the air. Written in no known language, they weren't words. They were relationships, mathematical, emotional, physical, frequencies representing gratitude, unity, remembrance. He whispered to himself, voice trembling. "It's not speech, it's intent." Every particle in this world seemed to carry meaning, as if reality itself were speaking softly, waiting for someone to listen. He recorded his findings and began to walk toward the river again. The pendant's light brightened with each step, syncing with his own pulse. He remembered the woman's words. "We call it the breath." The water shimmered ahead, moonlight breaking across its surface like glass veins. He knelt again, holding the pendant close. When the light touched the current, the river responded, rippling outward in concentric circles of golden luminescence. Suddenly, the air filled with whispers. Not voices, but harmonics, thousands of overlapping frequencies, grief, joy, laughter, prayer, all vibrating in exquisite harmony. He stood frozen, overwhelmed. The universe was alive with memory. He reached for his recorder, but something inside him whispered, "Don't measure this. Feel it." So he did. For the first time since leaving his homeworld, Talvek allowed the unknown to simply be. A shape appeared across the water. At first he thought it was the human woman again, but as it drew closer he realized it wasn't human. Not exactly. It was light, taking human form. A figure of pure radiance walked toward him, each step echoing in perfect rhythm with the heartbeat of the world. It stopped a few meters away, and though it had no face, Talvek felt it watching him, with warmth, not threat. He lowered his weapon. "Who are you?" The being tilted its head and its light pulsed. Once, twice, then in steady intervals. His translator couldn't comprehend it. But his heart did. He understood. "You seek to know why this world endures. Because it remembers." The words weren't heard. They appeared inside him, not in thought, but in resonance. He spoke aloud. "Remembers what?" "Faith." The figure extended a luminous hand. When a being believes in something greater than itself, it leaves an echo. Enough echoes become structure. Talvek's breath caught. "Are you saying consciousness shapes reality?" "All consciousness. But humans, they gave it focus. They believed hard enough to anchor the breath." He stepped closer, trembling. "The others, my team, they joined this?" The light pulsed softly. They stopped running from it. They listened. He fell to his knees. His mind raced with contradictions. Data versus faith, evidence versus wonder. He had spent cycles rejecting superstition, insisting life was statistical chaos held together by gravity and time. But here, gravity sang hymns and time bowed to belief. He whispered, voice breaking, "I was taught to worship knowledge, to measure, define, categorize. But this feels like truth." The figure's light brightened until he had to shield his eyes. Truth does not erase knowledge. It completes it. Then, as if satisfied, the figure began to fade. "Wait," he cried out. "Why me? Why show me this?" The last of its light curved into a smile. Not of lips, but of energy. "Because you came to study humanity. Now you'll understand what they are. The reflection of faith itself." And then it was gone. Talvek stumbled back to the camp, his mind burning with revelation. His suit's power reserves were nearly depleted, but his mission beacon still functioned. He activated the recorder one last time. "To the Selenari Research Command, this is Talvek. The data you requested is attached, but I doubt your instruments will interpret it correctly. The patterns on this world are not random, they are chosen." He looked at the pendant, and it's still glowing softly. "Humanity didn't evolve to dominate. They evolved to remember. Every emotion they've ever felt, every prayer, every act of defiance, it's embedded in the frequency of the planet itself. They left behind a living archive, a soul, if you will." His voice trembled. "We used to laugh at the idea of one creator. But after today, I can't laugh anymore. Maybe they weren't wrong. Maybe all our equations were just another way to look for him." He paused, lowering his head. "If I don't make it home, tell my people to look at the stars differently. Tell them the universe listens." Far above Earth's surface, a Selenari observation vessel orbited silently. Inside, researchers monitored Talvek's feed, their faces pale with disbelief as his words transmitted across the void. "Is he hallucinating?" one asked. "No," another whispered. "Look, sensors across the ship flickered." Their instruments were detecting fluctuations, electromagnetic harmonics resonating from the planet, matching Talvek's recorded signal. It wasn't interference. It was response. Earth was speaking back. And somewhere deep within its core, millions of faint human echoes joined into a single pulse that reached out into the stars. A whisper older than civilization, carrying across the void, "We are still here in the valley." Talvek stood alone beneath the stars. The pendant dimmed at last. Its message delivered. He looked toward the heavens and whispered, "They'll never believe me." And then, softly, Not to the stars, not to any god, but to something within him. But I do. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the faintest reply, a single word in a language older than sound, translated only in feeling. Welcome. The transmission reached the Selenari High Orbit Archive 12 days after Talvek's signal vanished. It came encoded in a harmonic pattern, not binary, not wave packet, but song. The ship's quantum relays nearly overheated trying to translate it. At first, they assumed corruption. Then they heard his voice. Inside the marble blue halls of the Helion Citadel, the High Council gathered. 6 scholars, 3 strategists and the Arch-Curator of Truth. Elder Maris Talvek's holographic form flickered above the central dais, repeating the same final transmission over and over. They believed hard enough to anchor the breath. Faith shapes the structure of reality. The universe listens. Each word seemed to pulse with energy, tiny ripples of sound, bending light around the hologram. Ridiculous, hissed Curator. Kinnear. He's delirious. Planetary sickness. Electromagnetic hallucination. But Maris, oldest among them, voice soft as folded silk, leaned forward. And yet the harmonic frequency persists. The signal's physics shouldn't exist. He gestured to the display. Their deep space monitors still showing faint pulsing light from Earth's atmosphere. See that? The planet is replying. Silence fell. They summoned the astrophysicist Varn Cattell, lead of the Stellar Harmonics Division. Varn was pragmatic, skeptical, and ruthlessly logical. He reviewed the data with narrowed eyes. The resonance frequency matches Talvek's biosignal. That shouldn't be possible from this distance. Unless, Maris murmured, the signal isn't traveling through space. Varn frowned. What are you implying? That it's traveling across belief. The others scoffed. Belief isn't a vector. Maris simply smiled. Neither was gravity until we learned how to fall. Hours passed. The council debated endlessly, science versus myth, data versus experience. Then a technician's voice broke through the chaos. We're receiving secondary signals from neighboring systems. The chamber fell silent. Across the void, unmanned satellites and long-dormant probes, and some centuries old, began activating. Each one emitted the same tone, a faint, rhythmic hum, the same frequency Talvek recorded. The technicians stared in awe as one by one. Abandoned machines awoke like sleepers stirred by a whisper. Ping, ping, ping. A pattern. Slow, deliberate. Beautiful. It wasn't interference, it was orchestration. They decoded the harmonic data embedded within the signal. It wasn't just an audio log. It was memory. Projected onto the council floor. Images of Earth unfolded in shimmering light. Forests breathing, rivers singing, cities glimmering under starlight. And humans, countless humans, each leaving trails of golden resonance wherever they walked. One image held the room still. A human soldier, kneeling beside a fallen comrade, whispering, "You're not gone. You're home now." The resonance from that moment rippled outward like a wave of light. Elder Maris's eyes shimmered. He said, "The world remembers. I see it now. It's not metaphor, it's literal." Kinnear slammed his staff. "This is dangerous nonsense." Maris turned to him calmly. "Is it? Or is it the first proof that spirit and physics are one and the same?" The council voted to classify Talvek's report as a containment priority 0, accessible only to top-level researchers. But curiosity is a contagion. Within days, copies leaked across research nodes, spreading like wildfire. Scholars, scientists, and explorers dissected every frame of his transmission. The younger generation, restless, idealistic, began whispering forbidden words. Faith, harmony, purpose, and among them grew a movement calling themselves the Listeners. They believed Talvek wasn't delusional. They believed Earth had spoken the first true universal constant. Belief creates structure. Varn Cattell couldn't rest. Logic demanded proof, not poetry. So he built an experiment. A vacuum chamber, sealed from all radiation and electromagnetic interference. Inside it, he placed a single atom suspended in perfect isolation. Then he projected Talvek's recorded harmonic pattern into the chamber. The atom vibrated. Once, then twice, then emitted light. He froze, staring at the data. The frequency shouldn't affect matter. But it did. He tried it again, thinking perhaps it was coincidence. It happened again, exactly the same. The atom responded to the pattern of belief. His assistant whispered, "It's listening." Varn's voice trembled for the first time in his career. "No, it's remembering." Within weeks, the Selenari Empire was divided. Half demanded suppression, claiming the discovery could destabilize their civilization's rational foundation. The other half demanded revelation, believing the breath was the key to understanding creation itself. Temples long abandoned, reopened as research sanctuaries. Priests and physicists began sharing equations and prayers on the same screens. Across every world, telescopes turned toward Earth, and as if aware of their gaze, the blue planet shimmered faintly in their feeds, not brighter but alive. One night, a young student on the moon of Tirash detected a pattern in the Selenari nebular field. Pulses of light repeating across constellations. She decoded them into coordinates, then into sound. It was music. Earth's frequency had spread across the stars, a resonance forming words, translated loosely by her instruments. "We remember you." The student wept. For the first time in recorded Selenari history, the Empire's greatest telescopes weren't aimed to conquer, but to listen. Elder Mara stood alone in his observatory, gazing at the vast blue orb suspended in the void. He whispered softly, "So this is what they meant by one." He clasped his hands, not in ritual, but instinct. If there is something listening, then let it hear us now. Outside, as though the universe responded, a faint aurora rippled across the stars in a subtle, delicate shimmer in the shape of a spiral galaxy, the same spiral carved on the pendant Talvek had carried. The old scholar smiled. "Not superstition," he murmured. "A conversation. In the darkness beyond, on countless observation ships and homeworlds, alien eyes lifted to the stars, not as scientists or conquerors, but as seekers. And far below on the blue planet that started it all, the forests whispered, rivers glowed, and the wind carried a single phrase through the trees. Not in any known language, but perfectly understood. They're listening now." There was no body to find. When the retrieval drones landed on Earth 6 months after Talvek's last transmission, they found only his broken visor near the river, half buried in silt. His suit was gone. No trace of biomatter, no DNA residue, just the pendant, still pulsing faintly, as though keeping time with something unseen. They cataloged it, sealed it, and sent it home. But that was not the end of Talvek. In the deep harmonic archive where Talvek's data logs were stored, technicians began noticing anomalies. Each night after the servers shut down, faint traces of signal reactivated themselves, not random noise, but structured data, a voice whispering through static. Log, entry, continuation. The staff assumed it was corrupted playback, but then the audio stabilized. "This is Talvek. I don't know how long it's been, or if I'm still..." The room fell silent. The light didn't destroy me. It rewrote me. I exist within the frequency now, the pattern of the breath. I can see beyond time, beyond form. The humans, they're still here, not as bodies, but as memory and will. Their faith sustains this world like a pulse through creation. He paused, the sound of running water audible behind his words. I understand now. To them, death was never an end. It was translation. Scientists replayed the message countless times, analyzing its waveform. It wasn't a digital file. It was quantum interference across every frequency simultaneously, like a whisper stitched through space itself. Varn could tell. The physicist who had once doubted everything stared at the data in awe. His consciousness. It's not in the system. It's in the signal itself. Maris nodded solemnly. He became part of the breath. They isolated fragments of the signal, moments of voice, flashes of thought. When assembled, they formed imagery beyond language, rivers flowing like veins of light, human figures standing beside Talvek, translucent but smiling, a vast horizon pulsing with a rhythm that matched the universe's background, radiation, the cosmic heartbeat, and embedded within it, a pattern of light identical to human brainwave signatures during prayer. Then came the impossible. moment Talvek's signal began transmitting, not just to Selenari channels, but across every listening array and range. Alien. Automated, even derelict probes. It bypassed encryption, bypassed distance. It simply appeared wherever there was consciousness to receive it, and wherever it reached, it spoke in the listener's own language. Do not fear what you cannot measure. It measures you. Belief is the universe remembering itself. You are not alone in the dark. Each phrase carried the same harmonic undertone, a resonance that filled listeners with inexplicable warmth, as if the universe itself exhaled peace. On world after world, beings stopped their work and looked up at their skies. For a moment, everyone felt seen. Days later, an anomaly appeared in the data feed from Earth. The planet's magnetic field began to hum, softly at first, then rising to an audible resonance. Satellites detected flashes of light forming over the continents. Not storms, but pulses of coordinated energy. They weren't random. They were voices. Audio reconstruction revealed layers upon layers of human speech, words of every language ever spoken, overlapping perfectly into one harmonic voice. We endure. We forgive. We are home. Varn stood before the feed, tears cutting lines through the dust on his face. This isn't haunting, he whispered. It's harmony. The pendant that once belonged to Talvek was locked deep in an isolation chamber aboard the Selenari Ark vessel Myrthon. Now, it began to vibrate. Alarms flared. Technicians flooded the chamber yard and gasped. The pendant had split open, unfolding like petals of light. Inside was not machinery, but living fiber, strands of luminescent energy, pulsing in rhythm with the Earth's signal. It projected a hologram of Talvek, not static this time, but alive. His eyes glowed faintly, yet his voice was calm, grounded. If you're hearing this, then you've listened long enough to feel it too. He looked around, meeting the stunned faces. The breath isn't bound to Earth. It's in every particle that's ever known life. Humans didn't create it, they awakened it. They gave it focus. And now it's listening to all of us. He paused. I thought I'd lost everything when I came here. My team, my body, my reason. But I found the truth. Life is not about survival. It's about remembrance. The universe keeps what we love. The hologram smiled faintly. I'm not dead. None of them are. And neither are you. Not truly. The pendant sealed itself again, silent, across the Selenari worlds. The reaction was unlike anything in their history. Temples and research labs filled with people kneeling side by side. Scientists running calculations as priests whispered ancient hymns. For the first time, knowledge and faith weren't rivals. They were partners, and the children, who had grown up under sterile lights, never believing in myths, began painting constellations on their walls again. One phrase became the new foundation of their civilization. The universe listens. Weeks later, sensors detected another anomaly. From deep space, a pulse began traveling outward from Earth at light speed, identical to Talvek's consciousness signature, amplified a millionfold. It moved through planets, stars, nebulae, leaving each slightly altered, their energy signatures tuned higher. It wasn't destruction, it was synchronization. Everywhere the wave passed, living organisms experienced vivid dreams and of light, memory and belonging. On one desert world, a dying traveler woke with tears on his face, whispering, "Someone heard me." On another, a child pointed to the stars and said, "They're singing." It wasn't just Earth anymore, it was everything. Varn recorded his final log that night. This began as a study of Deathworlders. We called them dangerous, savage. But the truth? They were guardians of meaning. They believed in something larger than themselves, and by doing so, they created it. He looked at the stars. Talvek proved that consciousness doesn't vanish. It converges. Maybe that's what they called God. Not a being, but the act of every living mind choosing to believe. He smiled, voice breaking. If that's true, then we've been speaking to him all along. He ended the recording with one final line, words now carved into the archives of every Selenari world. Faith is the physics of the soul. Then one night, the cosmic background itself shifted. Faint, measurable, undeniable. Astronomers across galaxies recorded the change. The universe's base radiation pattern had altered slightly, aligning perfectly with Earth's harmonic frequency. A signal, broadcast not from one world but from creation itself. It spoke only once. In every language at once, we remember you. Decades passed since Talvek's return signal echoed across the stars. Civilizations had changed, not through conquest, but contemplation. Weapons lay quiet, engines of war repurposed into observatories aimed toward Earth. And yet, in all that silence, a question persisted among the Selenari. If Talvek became light, could light still think? Theologians and physicists worked together now, building the resonance array, an instrument designed not to send messages, but to listen for meaning itself, faint whispers embedded in starlight. Every night they tuned into the cosmic background, searching for the hum of the universe that now carried a faint human heartbeat. And one night, the hum answered back. The array didn't just receive data, it received vision. A projection unfolded in the control chamber, not an image from cameras, but from consciousness. A figure stepped through the shimmering interference, recognizable, impossible Talvek, but he wasn't as he had been. His form was made of flowing aurora, translucent veins of light connecting into the air, his eyes infinite reflections of distant stars. He smiled softly, as if the gap between galaxies was no longer real. "You've come far," he said, his voice both sound and vibration, "but you still think of existence as a map, something with edges." "It isn't, it's a song, and I've only heard the first verse." Varn Cattell, aged now, his hair silvered, his faith quiet but firm, stepped forward, trembling. "Are you alive?" Talvek tilted his head. "Alive is such a narrow word. I am remembered, and in remembrance I live." The projection expanded until it filled the chamber. The scientists were no longer standing in their observatory. They were floating amid a sea of light. Each current of color carried voices, countless souls, countless civilizations. Human laughter mixed with alien hymns, prayers of joy and sorrow, blending into harmony. "This," Talvek said, gesturing to the radiance around them, "is what your people feared, the chaos beyond the physical. But it's not chaos. It's order, written in feeling instead of formula." He lifted his gaze. "Every act of kindness, every word of forgiveness, they ripple, they alter the frequency of creation itself. The humans, they understood that. Their faith wasn't about control. It was about release." A faint shimmer revealed the silhouettes of humans standing at the horizon. Explorers, builders, dreamers, soldiers, artists. None looked divine, yet all radiated quiet strength. Talvek's voice trembled with awe. They never tried to escape death. They just refused to be ruled by it. The resonance array's logs would later record what followed, though none could explain how the equipment continued functioning as physical matter dissolved into energy during the event. Varn, overwhelmed, asked the question that had haunted him for a lifetime. "Talvek, if this is what lies beyond, then who made it?" For the first time, Talvek smiled as if answering a child. "I don't know, but I've seen his fingerprints." He pointed upward where the light wove itself into fractal geometry so precise that it mirrored DNA, atom, and nebula alike. "He isn't a king or a cloud. He's the memory of every love that refused to die." The horizon brightened as if responding. "And he listens when we remember him." Varn wept, whispering through his tears, "Then humanity was right. There is something more." Talvek placed a glowing hand on his shoulder, warmth like sunlight filling the space. "You've always known. You just needed a world reckless enough to believe it anyway." The resonance grew unbearable, a crescendo of existence collapsing into silence. Then, suddenly, light, pure, infinite, gentle. Every living thing across the stars felt it, a second pulse through the universe, identical to the one from Earth generations earlier. But this one was different. It carried intention. Planets bathed in auroral glow, machines rebooted with new patterns of thought. Even the coldest void vibrated with something like heartbeat. Out of that pulse, a phrase resonated once more, not through sound, but understanding. "We are one memory dreaming itself awake," and then the light withdrew. When the Selenari woke in their control room, the hologram had vanished, but etched into the core of their array, burned into crystal data, was a final line of text. Tell them we found what they were praying to. In the years that followed, no one claimed to have seen Talvek again, but strange things began happening across inhabited worlds. Seeds buried in stone sprouted in places thought lifeless. Transmission beacons emitted musical tones when pointed toward Earth. Dying stars flared once, briefly, before fading, always in the same rhythm. One long, one short, too long. When decoded, it matched the pulse of a human heartbeat. And so the Selenari began to teach their children differently. They no longer said, "We study the universe." They said, "We listen to its remembrance." On a restored colony near the edge of the Orion Arm, a young Selenari boy once asked his mother, "Will we ever see humans again?" She smiled, looking up at the bright blue star that marked Earth's direction. "Every time you look at the light," she said, "you already are." He frowned. "But they're gone." She placed a hand on his chest. "Then why?" she whispered. "Can you feel them in here?" The boy listened, and for the briefest moment, he heard it. A whisper like 1,000 voices carried on the wind, saying something small yet vast. "Keep going." He smiled, without knowing why. Generations later, long after the names of Selenari and humans had blended into legend, explorers at the edge of the Andromeda Gate detected a faint energy anomaly. It was a message encoded in the cosmic background itself, endlessly repeating, across all spectra, not in words but in pulse, recognizable by every living being, the same beat that began with Talvek's last breath on Earth. It carried one final truth, the completion of his transmission, the culmination of a story that began with fear and ended in understanding. They're not primitive, they're eternal. The light we send never dies. It only travels slower than memory. Talvek Final Resonance Fragment. 1,000 cycles passed. Stars were born, burned, and fell into silence. Empires rose, discovered the old Selenari records, and fell again into dust. Earth in the Deathworld mirror was forgotten by name, though not by pulse, and yet beneath a young sun, the planet stirred once more. Forest grew where steel once stood. Oceans healed. The old scars of human civilization were buried under green. But deep below, remnants remained. Circuits fused to roots, data woven into the very DNA of reborn life. The world itself had become a living archive. It waited. Far beyond, in the Centauri cluster, a new civilization arose. The Lyran Ascendancy, descendants of explorers who once followed the resonance wave. They were seekers of the origin. Pulse, a myth said to come from a world that sang to creation. Their ships were alive with song, engines tuned to frequency instead of fuel, guided not by coordinates but by harmony. For centuries they searched. Then one day, a faint transmission whispered across deep space, an ancient call repeating itself like a heartbeat. We are one memory, dreaming itself awake. The signal led them to a blue-green world on the edge of the old Sol system. It was quiet, perfectly balanced, alive. They descended into the valley of what ancient maps called Himalaya, where snow fell like light, and the air shimmered faintly with static memory. There they found it, not a city, not a ruin, but a structure carved from stone and living crystal, an obelisk shaped like two human hands reaching upward. At its base, in a language older than their race, was an inscription burned into the rock. They came to study us. We taught them to pray. The explorers knelt, not from command, but instinct. The air itself seemed to hum in rhythm with their hearts. One of them, a young xenolinguist named Kale, touched the stone and gasped. "I can hear them," he whispered. "Voices, billions of them." He closed his eyes, and for an instant he saw flashes, not fire and sky, soldiers and laughter, music and tears. Humanity's entire history compressed into the heartbeat of the world. "It's alive," he breathed. "The planet remembers them." As the Lyran scientists activated their analysis drones, the obelisk responded. Light burst from its core, not energy, but memory. A holographic field enveloped them, showing Earth's history, from cavemen striking sparks in caves to explorers walking on stars. Every age, Every failure, every triumph, and then came Talvek, standing by a river, looking up at a human praying under the dawn. The same image the Selenari archives had described eons ago. Kale's heart raced. That's him, the first observer. The hologram shifted, showing Talvek's final transmission. They're not primitive. They're hunting us. But now the message didn't end there. The hologram flickered and Talvek's face softened into peace. No, they were teaching us how to survive the dark. Then the projection dissolved into light that sank into the explorers' chests. Into them. After that day, every member of the Lyran expedition began to change, not physically, but inwardly. They began dreaming of vast oceans and firelit skies, of hands building, hearts breaking, and voices whispering courage into silence. Their language grew richer, their art deeper, their understanding of empathy sharper. In their temples, they no longer worshipped stars, they honored the breath, the living memory of will and wonder. Children learned to pray in a language no one remembered learning, a language of earth. Centuries later, the Lyrans built the Hall of the Remembered Light on their homeworld. At its center burned an eternal flame, a fusion of all captured resonance frequencies, focused into one coherent beam. When scholars deciphered the last quantum layer of its code, they found something that silenced the universe. A simple ancient human phrase encoded in binary, endlessly repeating, "Let there be light." It wasn't religious dogma. It wasn't science, it was both. A declaration that creation itself began as a word, and that every act of creation since had echoed that same intention. Kyle, now an old man, wrote in his final journal, "They believed in one God. We see now that God is not a ruler but a resonance, the unity between faith and physics. Humanity didn't vanish. They evolved into remembrance itself. 1,000 years after the rediscovery of Earth, the Lyran homeworld experienced a night unlike any before. All stars dimmed for 3 breaths, then reignited, synchronized to a single frequency. From their observatories, scientists saw a colossal wave moving through the void, the same harmonic pulse Talvek had once described. This time, it was returning, and at its leading edge, the pattern of its waveform contained the unmistakable structure of human DNA, but not as it was, as it had become. Light structured into will. The universe itself was awakening. The Lyran broadcast every form of communication they knew, desperate to reach the approaching wave, and for a moment it answered. A transmission, faint but warm, filled every receiver, every frequency, every thought. We are the children of struggle and stars. We burned, we built, we believed, we reached beyond flesh, beyond fear, beyond death, and we remembered. A pause. You came looking for us, but you've been with us all along. The light you follow, that's us, still learning to love. And then as the wave passed through the Lyran system, every living being felt the same sensation, not terror, but peace, a feeling that the journey was complete. For a moment, the entire universe breathed in sync. Deep within the Lyran archives, one final file appeared, not uploaded, not transmitted, simply there. A voice, calm and clear, Field Observer Talvek recording, maybe for the last time. He chuckled softly. I came to study the monsters of a death world. I found gods made of courage instead. They prayed not for safety but for meaning, and by doing so they became part of it. Silence. Then a whisper. Faith was never superstition. It was the universe remembering its own heart. The final sound was a heartbeat, human, steady, defiant, then nothing. In the farthest reaches of space, on the edge of creation's expansion, a ripple of light still travels. It is faint, soft, eternal. Within it, encoded in every photon, are fragments of earth, laughter, rain, the warmth of sunlight through leaves, and a voice saying softly, "We're still here." When future explorers gaze into that light, they don't see stars anymore, they see home. Because humanity never vanished, they became the language of existence, the proof that even in the vast silence, faith and will can rewrite the universe itself. Final moral. Humanity's greatest weapon was never their strength. It was their refusal to believe they were alone.